What's going on, everybody? Ramdean and Black with you here in our Fight Network studios. Coming up December 30th. December 30th? Yeah, December
31st.
31st, New Year's Eve. UFC 207. So many fight cards
30th.
going on. 30th?
30th.
30th. UFC 207, the return of Ronda Rousey. Joe Rogan's ticked off because he says the UFC hype machine is focused completely on Ronda Rousey instead of pumping up the tires of Amanda Nunes, who took out Miesha Tate. We're not talking about that. We're going to talk about the main event of UFC 207 in the future. But we've got to talk about some of the 170-pound fighters that adorn the card, including the former 170-pound champion, Johnny Hendricks, taking on Neil Magny, as well as Tarek Saffiedine taking on
former Strikeforce
champion, taking on Dong Hyun Kim. Johnny Hendricks, Neil Magny. Johnny Hendricks doesn't seem to be the same Johnny Hendricks that went the distance with both Robbie Lawler and George St. Pierre. I'm sure those are fights that can take years off your life. But what do you expect from this version of Johnny Hendricks?
Yeah, he hasn't performed super well since then, and you wonder if it's psychological. He beats himself up after those fights.
Wonder Boy and Kelvin Gastelum, legit competition too.
Yes, that's true. You saw what Kelvin did in his last fight, eh?
Tim Kennedy
185. And I think on some level, maybe Johnny Hendricks can look at it and go, oh yeah, right, these guys, these are talents. Instead of looking at what he did wrong, go, man, people are progressing, so I need to do that. He can't look at it that, oh my God, if I don't win this one, I'm gonna retire. And I know he's alluded to that. He's just gotta go in there and have some fun. But then there's Neil Magny, who's like 30 feet tall and can punch you from here to that camera. You know what I mean? That's a real challenge. Wonder Boy played with keeping Johnny at a distance, being able to hurt him at a distance. That's what Magny does too. That's what he's going to look to do. So Johnny, hopefully after the Wonder Boy performance, has adapted that. Don't be sparring with boxers, because this is not boxing. Be dealing with people who are adept at fighting you from range, and I think he'll do that. But Magny has looked real good too. He beat Kelvin Gastelum, you know.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Who is?
If you're Johnny Hendricks, do you go back to your root art? Do you go make this about wrestling, considering that Neil Magny does possess that reach? He can attack from the outside. Just use your toughness. Find a way to get through those very treacherous waters to somehow get very close to Magny?
I think that would be what you'd love to do. You'd love to be on top of this guy. He's only this tall when he's on his back. That reach is not going to be relevant if you're inside of it.
Or up against the cage. That's what I'm saying. Either on the ground or up. Johnny Hendricks needs to be close. No?
Yes. Now, and it's not a real surprise. This is not a Johnny Hendricks thing. The whole game has got better at keeping you away from the hips. In the time since he was taking down Robbie Lawler to that last fight with Kelvin Gastelum, or the fight with Wonder Boy, the entire game has gotten better at keeping the wrestler away from your hips by moving their feet. As soon as you see certain fighters do it, the coaches start training those drills. As soon as that level goes up, everybody starts working it. And that is now the game. The idea of defending a takedown doesn't even take place if I keep you away from my hips. And that game has risen there. So he and others like him have to have risen their game at getting to your hips. And that's going to be the big question.
Tarek Saffiedine has a different type of assignment because Dong Hyun Kim doesn't necessarily go in. If they clinch and they go up against the cage, there's a number of throws because of his judo background that he can exploit. Is it the same type of philosophy for Tarek Saffiedine? Just play the outside game.
Yeah, Dong Hyun Kim, when he came up through deep when we were calling his fights, he was knocking dudes out with his left hand. And then he went to his sort of judo and wrestling heavy game of kind of really getting to the back hip, lacing that leg and working that whole game. People have adapted that style. He's very good at it. There's this interesting thing, if you want to go and study how this shift through space is changing, you go look at Damian Maia. How the hell does this guy keep getting everybody's hips and back? He's doing it different, where he's not shooting singles, he's not shooting doubles, he's not looking for the hips, he's not grabbing the single leg. He's traveling through space to attach himself to you. And Dong Hyun Kim does that too. This can be a cool fight. Tarek Saffiedine is a genius. He's brilliant, beautiful to watch. Beautiful to watch. And there will be times out in the open space, southpaw versus southpaw, Saffiedine switches, but you're going to see some cool stuff out there. I'm real excited about this fight.
Is it important for Saffiedine to get flowy really quickly, or can he take his time in this fight to try to figure out the enigma that is Dong Hyun Kim.
He always seems to get better as he's, doesn't start too fast. And there's a confidence that a really great striker has that things are going to get better for them as the fight goes on. Donald Cerrone gets better as the fight goes on. A lot of these guys do. And when you have that knowledge, the beginning of the fight becomes about being smart for these guys. But if you know you're going to win round 2 and 3 when it goes to it, let's just make sure we're not getting clipped with this guy at full power in round 1. So it makes sense to start slower for some of these guys. And even things, Donald Cerrone's a slow starter, that's not always true. We sometimes assign these meanings to things that aren't always there.
A couple of very important fights at 170 pounds going down at UFC 207 later this month.